Guys, what's going on? Hello and welcome to Serial at Midnight. My name is Heath, and I'm joined by my friend Kevin for a really interesting discussion. We're going to dig into it here. Kevin, what's going on?
Hey Heath, thanks for having me on with you. Been looking forward to this conversation. It's going to be really good.
It started off the air. We were talking about the title for this video is How to Enjoy Pop Culture in a Polarized World. And we were kind of talking about in a 24-hour news cycle, when we know so much about celebrities, how do we turn some of that off and just enjoy things? It was your idea. This video was your idea because you had all these, you brought this, you're like, Heath, you can tell me about it.
Oh, sure. The world we live in, is so polarized and divided. And with the 24-hour news, with social media, we not only know what celebrities are doing, the bad things and the good, but we also know what they're thinking. Once again, also the bad and the good. And, a lot of people draw lines, if, whether it's their actions, whether it's the statements they make, the beliefs they have, it might make it hard for someone to enjoy their work.
Yeah. And we're not even talking about cancel culture, although this does kind of fit hand in hand with a little bit of that, because we've talked about some of this before, like, well, where do you draw the line? How far is too far with a celebrity? I know I've talked about this with Vanessa in a video. There was a Patreon live stream about this at some point. This is even something a little bit further because everybody does have this point where they become saturated and they say, like, it's like every day someone says to me, I can't follow so-and-so anymore because I don't agree with them politically. And now I don't want to watch their movies, or, I'm not going to go see so-and-so because I can't stand their political opinions or something like that. And we know so much about everybody. I think of like back in the day, like Dick Cavett or somebody, he would have these really interesting conversations with people. And I was watching one just the other night, Orson Welles was on Dick Cavett, and they were talking about, he was saying some pretty crazy things, but it's still nothing compared to the nonstop 24-hour news cycle barrage of so-and-so's in trouble for like, we've got Weinstein, we've got Bill Cosby, we've got all this stuff going on. We were talking a little bit, like, so knowing what I know about Harvey Weinstein, and he was convicted, right? He did it. Ari Polanski, there's another one, Roman Polanski. How does that shape how I watch Chinatown, or how I watch all those 90s Miramax movies that I really love? Because if I follow my moral compass, do I just stop watching all that stuff? For me, the answer is no, I don't do that, but it's so complicated, right? What are your thoughts on any of this?
It's a tough decision, and I find myself, the lines I draw seem to vary. Some lines are hard lines, some lines are soft lines, and then it's very, I guess you could say, inconsistent. A lot of times it depends on the connection I have, with a performer. And in the case of Harvey Weinstein, I tend to think, well, he was the producer, and yes, he's making money off of it, but so are the actors, everyone on the crew. They're making some money off of it, or they've made some money off of it. So if I draw a line there and say I'm not watching any Harvey Weinstein movies, or I'm not purchasing any, then I'm hurting them, a group of people, for the actions of one man.
Yeah.
And that decision easier. In the case of Roman Polanski, that one's very tough, because just what he did and fleeing justice, it's hard, and I haven't been able to go back and watch Rosemary's Baby since I found that out. And Rosemary's Baby was one of my favorite movies of all time. I think it's just a perfect horror movie, sets a great tone. If I went back and watched it, would it color my perception of the movie now? Would it dampen my entertainment? Would I look at it in a different light? Does that make sense?
It does make sense, and that happens too. There are movies that I watch now, and I'm like, oh, I can't stand this person now, and it's because of things that I know from them. I'm not going to say who it is because I don't like. I'm not going to give you my list because it's not. That's not even what it's about. It's not
No,
necessarily. This video is not about like, well, here's what I think. Here's my hard stance. It's a bigger conversation about our relationship with this stuff and where we draw these lines, just to get people thinking about, where do you draw the lines? Polanski's a really interesting case because he's super talented as a filmmaker, has made some incredible movies. What he did is obviously unforgivable for those. I'm not even going to get into it, but for those that don't know, he did something really terrible with a child. And he did it. And he for sure did it. And he, I read this, I talk a lot about this book called is The Big Goodbye, The Long Goodbye. Now I can't remember. I think it's The Big Goodbye. And it's about the making of Chinatown, and they talk about Polanski, and they talk about Robert Evans and that whole thing that was happening with the new Hollywood in the 70s. And I saw an interview with the author, and the interviewer was asking the author, is Roman Polanski a talented filmmaker or a sex offender? And the author was like, well, he's both. He's not one or the other. He's both. But when I watch some of these movies, even not just Polanski, but some of these other things from people that we know now, I the Kirk Douglas thing. Since I have found all this stuff out about Kirk Douglas, he's dead. There's no trial coming for that. Whatever the accusations are, he apparently did something pretty terrible with Natalie Wood, when she was also a minor. And there's no hard evidence for it. Natalie Wood never filed charges, but there are enough people talking about it that now when I watch a Kirk Douglas movie, there's specifically is Last Train from Gun Hill. It's a revenge movie. It's a Western. It's a revenge movie. And it kind of mirrors the plot of what he is accused of having done. And it throws a whole new angle to that movie, to where the next time I watch that movie, I'm going to be like, it's just surreal. But I do still watch it. So I've drawn that line, and I don't have any firm answers for that. You had something, less people want to put this in a political context because it's not.
no.
Talk to me about, you had such a great point about John Wayne that I have never heard anybody talk about before.
Okay, John Wayne avoided service in World War II. He thought, that his career would suffer. His agent was really pushing him to avoid the draft, so he got an exclusion for family reasons. He was the main one to take care of his family, so he didn't have to serve. But he played these larger than life heroes, and not just in westerns, but in war movies, the Sands of Iwo Jima, the Green Berets, and it's hard to look at him as a heroic figure when I know that he went out of his way to avoid serving his country, especially in a conflict like World War II, when they needed everyone. And you had people like Jimmy Stewart and Glenn Ford and Henry Fonda, they all served. Jimmy Stewart flew bomber missions, received the Distinguished Flying Cross, and it didn't seem to hurt his career when he came back. I have a great deal of respect for all of them, whereas my respect for John Wayne, is very small. And I think because of the roles, it's the roles he chose. If he was a villain, it might be easier to watch, or if he played, someone, with low character, yeah, it would be great. But then, Sylvester Stallone avoided service in Vietnam. He went overseas to attend college, and he's played those heroes, Rambo, larger than life characters. But I don't have the same problem with him that I do with John Wayne. And I don't know if that's because I had a stronger connection with Sylvester Stallone's movies, or if it's the actual conflict. Vietnam was a different war than World War II, where, at the time, people looked on it, those who avoided the draft as draft dodgers, but that's kind of smooth, as we see what the war did to people and why it was fought. So that's where I say my thoughts on this are inconsistent. The lines I draw are different for different actors. And to go back to the point where you watch, Kirk Douglas, is it going to be harder to see him as a hero, or easier to see him as a villain now? That's, all in the perception.
Yeah. And it is interesting, as you point out, that we will have the same, you have this conviction, but it's different for different people. They're like, well, I like Sylvester Stallone, but John Wayne, it's because he's such this huge hero. He's the icon. He's the portrait of the red-blooded American hero, right?
Right.
And John Ford gave him a hard time about his military service too. This is covered in Five Came Back. It's a book and a documentary series about Hollywood during World War II, and they kind of get into that. And I remember finding that out about John Ford, really holding that over John Wayne's head, like I think for years, for a couple of decades after that. He was just like this guy,
I tend to have a little bit of what's called oppositional defiance disorder. And it's at the fact that because everyone puts John Wayne on that hero pedestal, I mean, it's part of our language. You're going to be John Wayne, served in the army, and John Wayne was everywhere. And is it because everyone thinks of him that way? Is that why I am so easy to say, no, I can't support him?
Yeah. And you're bringing another viewpoint, which is John Wayne as someone who failed this country, who did not go serve in his country. It's a whole new wrinkle to this conversation that I haven't heard introduced before in this context. And I think it's really valuable. And I think that it really shows how complicated this is and how it's not something that falls along political lines. It's not something that one side can say, it's those guys. It's all of us. We've all got this within us. We all have these lines. I don't like so-and-so because they were in whatever. Or I heard the way that they did this thing. We all have these things. I got actors I don't like to watch on screen for various reasons. I know you guys do too. What do we do about it? For me, I stay off social media as much as I can. That helps. Because if you like somebody, you're probably going to like them less. What's the rule? Like, you don't talk about politics and you don't talk about religion. Like, and that's the thing, right?
Yeah. And
that's all we want to talk about. You sign on a social media, it's nothing but politics and religion. It's like leading our lives. So that works for me, but you had a cool idea about, like, if you don't want to support artists, you could buy used media.
Right. If your point is, I don't want to watch them because I don't want to give them the money, the financial support, then buy used media. Go to your local, your pawn shops, your consignment stores, your game stores. They sell used movies, and that way, the movie had already been purchased. Money has already gone to them. You're not giving the money to them. You're giving the money to a local business.
Yeah, that
might make it easier, if it's a financial standpoint, or on streaming, because the contract's already been paid. They've got their money. As long as you're not giving them that money. However, if your stance is, I can't stand to watch them because I can't get out of my head, what they did. I don't have any answers for that, and I wish I did, because then I might be able to enjoy some of the movies I used to. I think we just need to work on what movies are about, and movies are about escaping. And you're not watching, the actor isn't playing himself, or rarely. They're playing a character, and you need to get lost in that character. You need to get lost in that story, and try not to think about what they did. If the movie's good enough, or if you enjoy it that much, then I think you could get lost and forget about the circumstances surrounding it.
Yeah, you can for sure do that. It's getting harder, but it is possible. And movies are entertainment. They're not meant to be. We do study them. There are movies that we love and that we hold up on this pedestal, but they are first entertainment. They're just supposed to be, it's popular entertainment. They should be taken that way, but it's easier said than done. And that's why we're making this video, because I wanted to talk about it. Anything else you want to say before I wrap it up?
I can't really think of anything, unless it's to push for people to support you, to watch your videos. If you've got the money, join your Patreon. I've done it for a little bit over 2 years. I've loved every minute of it. There's some great discussions going on the Patreon Facebook page. It's politics free. We talk about movies. We talk about music, all brands of entertainment, and everyone is very respectful of each other, and it's very welcoming atmosphere. And I've got to thank you for that. You've set the tone.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. That means a lot. Yeah, we there are over 100, and I think there's well over 120. Last time I counted, it was 120, but exclusive videos that are only on Patreon, deeper conversations like this one, and just fun stuff, silly stuff, behind the scenes stuff. There's collection tours, and we got some big plans coming up. We're going to get back into the live stream thing, and we'd love to have you guys if you're watching this. Top level support is $7. So I set it low enough. My idea was like, well, it's like a fast food meal or something like that. So I wanted everybody to be able to come hang out and play. So thank you. You are a valuable member of the Patreon community, and there's cool stuff happening, and you're behind some of it. And this video was your idea. This was your baby. So thank you for bringing this to the table.
Well, thanks for allowing me to join you and talk about this. It's something that I think about quite a bit, and maybe overthink it, but because I love the medium so much, that I worry about, am I being responsible?
That's a good point. And you know what? We're getting older. You and I are both, we're not the target market for Hollywood at this point, and we both are parents as well. And I think that that's something to consider. That plays into the conversation. So once you start when you get to a certain phase in your life and you start thinking more responsibly about what is my impact, what is, even just protecting, like when I'm curating things for my 16-year-old, for my teenager, I'm like, there are certain things I'm like, ooh, I don't know about that. It just changes the way you think, and you start having these deeper, I don't know if everybody does. I know I have, and you have too. So it just seems to happen as you get older and as your perspective changes, and being outside of the target for Hollywood, I think really does matter. I think that's got something to do with it. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree. They're not making the movies these days for us. We can still enjoy them, and different attitudes, different thought processes, different beliefs, and I'm sure our parents and their parents, went through the same thing with the changing of, entertainment over the decades.
Every time I talk to my dad about movies, because he follows the channel and he knows what's going on, he'll be like, they don't make movie stars like they did back in, and for him his cutoff is like the 70s or maybe the 80s. And he's like, after that, I'm not interested in watching them. I remember he would be like, Adam Sandler, that guy better save his money because he's got no talent. And I was like, well, I think Billy Madison is pretty funny and Happy Gilmore, but you do reach an age and you're just like, well, this is, there's this thing that happens mentally. But conversations like this come out of it. So guys, if you're watching this episode and you made it this far, what are your thoughts on this? Again, this is not a political conversation. This is not nobody's drawing any lines on anybody else. This is just like, how do you reconcile your fandom of things with people that you don't necessarily like, or companies? That's something we didn't talk about. That one company that I'm not a fan of at all, but I struggle because I'm like, I want to get this, but I don't want to support this company. You know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yes. And I mean, you've got Disney. I mean, Disney is are they the Magic Kingdom, or are they the evil empire, or a little of both?
Yeah, that's a whole other video too, but that's a great point, because I love Disney parks and I love Disney history, but Disney is a corporation, Disney is a company, Bob Iger, all the stuff that they did behind the scenes. If you've read Bob Iger's book, is so incriminating of this like egotistical self-control thing, the things that he does and that he confesses to. I think he's proud of it in his book, but I read it and I'm like, you piece of crap. Like, what are you, like, how could you do this to people? Yeah, but yet I love Disney. How do I reconcile my love of Disney history with the oh, and then there's this Eisner quote, Michael Eisner in the 80s when he came in, he said, I don't have the exact quote in front of me, but it was something to the point of, we are not here to make art. We are here to make money. And yet they made stuff that I somehow ended up connecting with and loving. So it's crazy. And I don't like Michael Eisner as a person. I don't like him as he's not a creator, right? He's a producer guy. He's a moneymaker. He's a businessman. It's now we're on a whole other thing.
Yeah. Now we can talk about their stance on the copyright laws too, and how they keep trying to get them extended.
Yeah. And pretty soon, 5 companies, it's going to be 3 companies will own everything. They'll own all of entertainment history. All right, guys, thank you so much for watching this episode. Kevin, thank you so much for bringing it to the table. Continue the conversation in the comments below. And until next time, we will catch you later.